Hello, and welcome again to the Graduate and Graduate Careers Fair series of seminars for our fifth session of the day. And this is a really interesting one and very practical in terms of ways to highlight your skills in an interview. And we're delighted to welcome Carmel Morrissey, who's a careers and mindset careers consultant at HILT. HILT, we've worked with HILT for many years at these seminars and sessions, and always great insights, very practical advice in terms of how you can prepare for an interview. There's always some element of stress and questions you may have for any interview, and we've basically put together a poll here that Gabby will be putting live here, and it's basically asked, which of the following questions do you consider to be the hardest one to answer? So let us know what you think, and we'll reveal the results of that later on. We'll have time factoring at the end for questions, so please do put your questions in the chat for Siobhan. And that's enough of me talking, and let's listen to the experts. So I will hand you over to Siobhan, and I'll see you on about 20 minutes. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks so much, Rory, and delighted to be here this afternoon. As Rory said, I am working with HILT as a careers consultant. I joined in 2019, and I bring more than 20 years experience as a careers consultant with me. So hopefully I'll be able to give you some practical tips today to kind of get yourself ready and in the mindset for taking on an interview. Little shameless plug for my the HILT founder and careers consultant, Sinead English's book here, CV and Interview 101, really good practical tips and can flesh out a lot of what we're going to talk about today. So what are we going to focus on? We're going to focus on making a great first impression. It's what everybody would love to be able to do, to start off that interview where they know they've got everything in the bag, they kind of feel relaxed, they're ready, and you've started by doing something really, really good and finding your footing. So we're going to tell you and give you some hints and tips about how best you can do that. How to use the STAR method to your advantage. So this is a method that we advocate for preparing answers in advance of your interview, and then how to use that when it comes to the interview situation, how to bring them to life. And then we're going to talk about wrapping up with confidence, how you can finish the interview on a real strong note and not just have it kind of trail off and you wondering, goodness, what did I do or what didn't I do? It's going to put you the best foot forward to really, really leaving that interview knowing that you've given it your best, you've given it your all, and then hopefully be able to be successful in getting the position. So making first good impression begins long before you sit in the interview room. You are going to be doing interview prep, and getting ready is the best way, is to predict the questions. But when we meet with people, they've come to us, they've Googled 101 best ways of, questions, 101 questions to best ask for as an accountant, and they come to us and they're completely head-wrecked, they're completely bamboozled. So please don't do that. Don't start, because Google won't disappoint. It'll spew you out loads and loads and loads of results, but none that will probably get you where you need to be. So what we suggest is you predict the questions by using the job description. So go through it forensically, and we're talking pretty old school, highlighter or on screen, use your highlighting tool. And what you're going to do is pick out from the job description, when they describe the person's specification or the duties they expect you to do, pull out from there what they're asking you from you. And that's what they're going to ask you about in the interview. So for example, if they're looking for you to have leadership skills or be able to solve problems, that's going to be there in the leadership, in the job description. So when you start picking out these things, it becomes much clearer as to what you're going to be asked when it comes to an interview situation. They might ask about a time you've contributed to a team. They want a team player. They might talk about, numerous tasks and a very busy role. And you need to be able to explain then how you juggle your time, how you prioritize your time, and how you put things in order to get things done. So what they're looking for in the job description, they're going to ask you about an interview. So it stands to reason that you're going to be able to pick that out from the job description and put yourself in the best position to predict the questions. Then you're in the interviewer's shoes. You kind of get a feel for what it is they're going to be asking you. And it allows for it to become more like a conversation than a big Q&A where you're able to talk and broadly talk about your examples. So when you start then thinking about examples to highlight those skills, so if it is team working or it is leadership, we recommend you start. And how do you start? You make sure that the idea and the example you're coming up with is specific. It's about a specific place and time. It's, for teamwork, maybe it was a college project you did last year. Maybe it was during an internship you did where there was a project that you were collaborating on as part of a team. So think about a time and a place when that happened. It needs to be true. The reason it needs to be true is that you have to be able to talk about it in depth. If you could ask probing questions, so what happened then? Or what did you learn about that project? You need to be able to talk about it in detail, because the probing questions scratch the surface and they get behind that first level answer. So even though you might have prepared answers, you still need to be able to talk about things in a little bit more detail. They need to be animated. What we mean by that is you need to be able to bring the story to life, bring the situation to life that you were in, so that the interviewers get a feel for how things were going. What that also means is that it means the story has enough depth to be able to be talked about for 2 minutes. And that's how long we say that you should spend talking about each answer. It should only be 2.5 minutes, so you don't have to talk for a long, long time. And make sure that it's recent. So within the past 3 to 5 years would be really, really good. So when we're working with graduates, very often they're telling us, oh, but maybe I've only done one internship and the rest of it is maybe in bar work, or, oh, I've not really done any paid employment. We then would encourage you to think about your volunteering experience. Try and think of times where you demonstrated leadership, where you demonstrated collaboration, where you demonstrated teamwork, and pull your examples from there. And so it's allowing you to kind of think laterally, so you don't have to think in place. It's when you've demonstrated the skills rather than just done jobs and duties within a role. So then I mentioned the STAR method, and what does that stand for? Well, the STAR method stands for the situation, the task, the action, and the result. So what that means is you're going to spend the first 30 seconds of your 2-minute answer describing the situation and task. So if it's, again, we're working off the teamwork example, well, let me tell you about last year. I was working in a group project. There was 4 of us involved, and the aim of the project was to, and you give them the aim of the project. And my role was X. So then you're moving into the main meat of the story. This is the action phase. Each of these statements should begin with I. And it's a very hard thing to do in practice, because we talk about we all the time. We talk about the team do this and the team did that and we did this. In an interview situation, you have to channel the I. So try and then logically bring the interviewer through the different steps of what you did. So first I did this, then I did that, then I did the other. And what you're hoping is that by the end, you're able to then wrap up the story with a really strong result. So for example, maybe your team working project was to cut the time of doing a certain task, and shave some time off doing a repetitive task. So your result then would be, so as a result, we ensured that we were able to reduce the time for doing that task by 2 days every quarter. So you're showing the employer that you understand that the actions you took had a direct result on what's happening. So once you start thinking about your experience in terms of competencies and in terms of skills, it's much easier then to start breaking down your examples and try and pop them into the relevant, where they're going to demonstrate the relevant competency, whether it is leadership or team working or problem solving. And we would suggest you take an A4 sheet of paper and break it into 3. So your top section is going to describe the situation or task, remembering 30 seconds. Then your middle section is going to talk about your I statements. And then you're going to talk about your results. So if in team working, we're talking about, tell me about a time you contributed to the team, what was your role and what was the outcome. So there's the question we've devised that might test for teamwork. You then fill in your situation and task, you fill in your actions, your I statements. First I did this, then I did the other, and then I did the other. And try and keep them logical so that you're not having the interviewer to try and fill in gaps or work out, well, how did it move from here to here? So you're keeping it nice and logical in how it did, and then your result, and make that quantifiable where possible. For example, as I mentioned, cutting the amount of time to do a task by X%, or enhancing a filing system, which meant that records were much more easily retrievable. Whatever it is you did, That's where you're going to do. And you're going to do these for the other competencies as well. And you're going to devise your questions. So for example, for customer service, tell me about a time where you went over and above to provide excellent customer service for a client. Tell me about a time where you had to make a critical decision between A and B. Tell me about a time where you demonstrated keen communication skills. So come up with a question that would test for each of these competencies, and then write out your sheet, your start worksheet, to get them ready and to get your kind of thoughts flowing. We would say you only need one per scenario. So I'm not saying you need 6, when I say 6 minimum, that you need 6 customer service. What we're saying is if you have 6 different situations to talk about, you will be able to be in a really good position to start an interview, because you'll be able to weave those in for whenever that would be possible. So for example, your decision-making one might also be one that you might use for leadership. Your communication skills might also be the one that you're using for customer service, but always only use each example once, because once you've used it, you've done it. And always lead with your best cards as well. So kind of rank your examples from best to kind of maybe a little bit weaker, so that you're making sure where possible you're getting your best answers out there first, and you're not having your little best one in your back pocket waiting to throw it out there when they go, well, thanks very much for coming. So you've noticed we're still not even in the interview yet, because we're still at the time where we need to practice, practice, practice. And out loud is the most important thing. We've often worked with individual clients who come, and we've sent them out the worksheet of questions based on the job description, and they come back and they've got loads and loads of really brilliant A4 pages, just like that, with all the notes on it, but they haven't spoken them out loud. So the answers don't seem like second nature to them. Now, don't learn them off by heart, because if you do, you're going to miss a line, you're going to trip yourself up, you're going to become a cropper, and the interview panel won't know that you've missed a line, but you'll know yourself, and it'll put you, on the back foot. So practice. It should sound slightly different every time you tell it, but the bones of the situation should sound the same. So practice out loud. Your ear will get used to hearing it, and then it won't seem as as alien or as foreign to you when you're saying it out loud within the interview situation. So you're now going to be going into the interview, and you've one last bit of prep to do, and it's the start strong. So what we suggest you do is to take one last bit of prep, which is to get another piece of paper, breaking it into 3 sections, and it's called the Tell Me About Yourself. And what that's going to cover you for is for the Tell Me About Yourself question, the Talk Me Through Your CV, tell me why your experience matches the role we have here. They can ask this question in a lot of different ways, and often for some clients, for some companies, they don't even grade you on that answer, but they will still ask it to try and settle you in. So it's normally one that people dread, but it's one you can predict. It's one you can get ready for. So we again would ask you to spend a little bit of time coming up with a 2-minute answer for Tell Me About Yourself, where you're going to start with your current situation, with your current education. So I'm a recent graduate, or I'm due to graduate in X, Y, and Z from Y university, and the date. I am, I have taken on 2 internships while at college. My first one was in X role in Y company. My other was in Y role in the other company. And you're going to then talk about what you learned and what you did within those roles. You're going to use those competencies that you've highlighted in the job description. You don't say that how you have the skills yet. You just have to say that you have them. When it's moving into the skill sections, you go from my education and my career to date. I know that I have the leadership or team working or problem solving skills that are critical to this role, and I would love to be given the opportunity to take it on. So you've settled yourself down, and you've made it about you. You've made it about your application, your CV, and it should be a summary. Don't feel that even if they do say talk me through your CV, they don't want you to walk you through their CV line by line. They want you to be able to give a potted history, so that at the end of that 2 minutes, they get a really good feel for what you've studied, what your dissertation was in, how, when you're due to graduate, what work experience you've had to date. And as I mentioned earlier, even if it's volunteer experience, bring that in. And then a summary of your skills before moving on to say that you would love to be given the chance to take it on. And that should then settle you into the interview when they ask you that very, very first question. And then you're moving into the competency questions, where they will ask you the ones about teamworking. They will ask you the ones about, so the important thing here is to take the learning you've done and all the prep and all the planning you've done and answer what you were asked. Because very often, you'll devise your question for teamwork, but that mightn't be exactly the teamwork question that you get asked. So when they tell me about teamwork, and they ask you the question, don't just launch straight into your example. Have a little think to make sure that the way you've rehearsed your answer, the way you've practiced your answer, matches answering that question. If it doesn't, give a slight tweak, a slight change, probably to the intro is all that you need, and then you can move in to your situation and task. And as you're answering those questions, keep STAR in your mind, because it'll help you to move through the phases. You're going to tell them about the situation and task. You then go into the action phase, and then you go into your result. And if you find your mind wandering, or you find yourself, you've gone a little bit askew, that's where your STAR will really help you, because you're thinking, okay, I'm in the situation and task. I need to get off that. I'm here too long. I need to move in to tell them about what I did. And similarly, if you find you're kind of talking and you're getting all the I's out, you need to move then to the result. And it's very much easier to tell a story when you know the end. When you know the end result and you know how it finishes, it's much easier to tell. So to hit your target, what are you going to do? You're going to show them that you're relevant to the job. And the way you're going to show them that is by having done such good prep in advance, by really, really understanding and knowing the job description, knowing what they're looking for. You're going to tell them that you are that person. You're going to have done really good research on, the company, and that's not just about the, knowing the ins and outs of the About Us page of the section of their website. It's about doing really, really good research. It's about, looking up when there have been in the news recently, finding out if there's any new initiatives that you've seen in the media or in social media that are, something that really interests you. Have they been involved in innovative projects that you would really like to also get to know more about? So show them and demonstrate to them that you are the candidate that's right for them, and that you are relevant to the job, and that you have the skills that they're looking for. And then the other way you're going to hit the target is at the very end, tell them that you want the job. So don't let the interview just trail off at the end, where it kind of falls really flat, having done such good work up to now. Very often they might ask you, do you have any questions, or do you have anything to add? If you've got a really good question, now's the time to ask it. But if you don't, if you feel you've had quite a good conversation, and sometimes it's good to think of an interview like a conversation, like a business meeting, where you're sharing information, they're sharing information back to you or asking you questions. So it becomes a bit more natural, as opposed to almost that stage thing of question, answer, question, answer. And if you are able to harness the beginning of the end of the tell me about yourself we spoke about earlier, that summary of skills, and stating that you really would love to be given the opportunity to take the role on, because you can make a strong contribution, that will finish the interview in a really, really strong situation. So you can finish by saying, well, always thank them for their time. That is the one thing that sometimes people walk out of and they go, oh, I never said thank you. So always go, well, I'd just like to take a minute to thank you for your time for interviewing me this morning. I know that I have got the X, Y, and Z skills that are really critical to the role here, and I would love to be given the opportunity to take it on. Or I know I can make a strong contribution to the role, and I would love to be given the opportunity. So, you're finishing it off really strongly, really nicely. And then if it's in person, you're able to walk out of the room and, with your head held high. If it's a video interview, you wait until you're definitely out of the room before you flop in the chair and blow out and go, oh my God, thank God that's over. Because, while the camera's on, you're on. So make sure that happens as well. So then after, and you're thinking after, oh my God, it's giving me more work. And I'm afraid I am giving you more work, because you walk out of there and you think, oh my God, I'll never forget that as long as I live. And unfortunately, you will. 2 weeks' time, the interview will be a faded memory, and you'll be trying to remember what were the kind of things you were asked. So as soon as you get the chance, when you've had a chance to kind of let it all settle with you and debrief, jot down the questions that you were asked. And beside each one, jot down how well you answered them. So for example, you might say, they asked me about teamwork. I felt I answered it really well, but I forgot to bring in X, Y, and Z into the result, which would have made my answer a lot stronger. Or they asked me about why. I felt I didn't start off particularly well. I spent too long getting to the action phase, but once I did that, I got into the zone of the question. I did really, really well. What that will do is it will allow you to kind of have time to reflect on where you might be able to work on areas for improvement, seek feedback then afterwards if you are unsuccessful. What that does is it kind of allows you to map and figure out, well, did I have the same feelings as the interviewer, or was I completely off base? Maybe I thought I did really well in one particular question, and they're thinking that no, I didn't do exactly as well as I thought I did. So seek feedback and then act on that feedback. And what that means is literally revisiting, literally going back to the situation where you are saying, right, okay, I need to work more on the tell me about yourself and get myself settled. I need a stronger example when it comes to team working. And, a really good tip for if, you're starting your first full-on career job post-graduation, or even if you're taking on an internship or whatever that may be, keep what we call a competency diary with you. So instead of going, I did X, Y, and Z project, think of it in terms of the skills that they're going to be looking for. Oh, that was a really good example of team working, or that was a fantastic example there of problem solving that I came up with. And if you jot those things down, because when it comes to doing another interview or an interview, you rarely think of your things that you've done in your jobs as competencies. You think of them in terms of skills. It's like the job description. It's the detail of the little bits and pieces that you're doing rather than the job description itself. So act on that feedback, and that will again put you in the best position to then ace your next interview if unfortunately this one doesn't go as well as you'd hoped. And then you will be that little light, shining little bulb, and you will be able to be successful in your interview and getting side eye from all the others candidates who've been sitting there going, good God, how did he or she do so well in that interview? So I hope it's been a whistle-stop tour. We always struggle when we try to put together 20 minutes because Sinead and I could talk for hours. So I'm going to wrap it up there so we can field some questions, and I hope that I've given you some tips today to be able to go and ace your interview when you get called.
Thanks so much, Siobhan. I really appreciate it. I know, as you say, it's hard to cover so much ground in 20 minutes. We do have quite a number of questions, and so I just want to pull up the results of the poll that we asked,
Sure.
which is interesting just in terms of the, what people do find difficult. So we asked, what's the following questions do you find, most difficult to face in an interview? So we did 5 of them, and the most common, well, the one that was proved the most difficult was, what is your greatest weakness? 33% of people thought that one, followed by, where do you see yourself in 5 years' time? And the third one then was, sorry, I've got 2 screens. The third one was, tell me a bit about yourself, which I always found a hard one to face. And then we had 12% had, why do you want to work here? And have you any questions for us was 9%. So I suppose just the most common one, what is your greatest weakness? 33%. Why does that one throw people so much, do you think? Or why do people find it so hard to grapple with?
It's a really hard one, and it's despairing to think that some companies are still sticking with it and still asking it, because it's just it's not around as frequently as it was, thank goodness. So what we would say our strategy for answering a question like that is have a think about the role, and think about something that's relevant to the role but not toxic to the role. So for example, if you're going for a finance job, you're not going to sit down and go, well, actually, my biggest weakness is figures. I hate them. I hate figures. I hate anything to do without them. It's not going to help you. So if you, but likewise, there's no point in saying, well, I'm used to cooking, because that's not going to get you anywhere either. So what we would say, it's relevant to the role, but not toxic to the role. So taking that financial example, you might say, oh, well, I'm actually My biggest weakness is I'm really, really up to date with Sage Quick Pay and some other package, but I'm not as familiar with Y package that I've seen in your that I know that's required for this post. So I've enrolled myself on a course to get skilled on that, and I will be starting that in the next week. So it's
building a positive into a negative, yeah.
Exactly. So it's relevant to the role, but not toxic to the role. Okay,
I have some more questions here, and we have some of this. We'll get through as quick as we can. One here: if you don't find it, somebody says they find interviews very stressful, and I think that's probably the case for most people. But if you don't normally talk a lot, if you don't naturally elaborate on things, what's the best way to develop that skill? And let's face it, there is an element of acting in every interview. There is an element of performance. Any tips on how you can kind of, if for someone who just finds that very hard,
absolutely,
any tips that they can, that they can use?
I've yet to have somebody skip into interview training with me who goes,
I can't wait.
I love interviews, they are my favorite. So one really good tip, so aside from kind of preparing in advance, so at least you kind of got your thoughts together and additional detail put in, like using those star templates or writing of those star things, is when you're in the moment. There's a technique called PRA, which is pause, repeat, answer. So you're asked the question, so tell me about a time when you contributed to a team. You pause, you repeat the question back to them. So you'd like to find my best example of when I contribute to a team. Yes, I can remember. And then you begin to answer. And what that does is
engage your brain, and that's
engage your brain. It allows your heart rate to kind of slow down. You're quickly mentally able to flick through the examples you've pre-prepared, and you're able to select the one that best example. So it gives you that, because again, we tend to rush in to answer every question, so
so take a sip of water, just take it,
slight second, just pause, repeat, answer. PRA.
And if you do get thrown by a question, say that one, where do you see yourself in 5 years time, or what's your greatest weakness, and you go, and you just get that dreaded nothingness. How do you recover from that? I suppose my random question.
The best advice we can give is that each question, think of it like it's a separate box where you're filling that box with as much information as you can. If there's a box that really trips you up, doesn't work out the way you hoped, that you really made a hash of, put a lid on the box and move it to one side. Don't let it affect the rest of your interview, because sometimes that's what happens. I mean, somebody might do a really bad tell me about yourself despite practicing it, and the whole rest of the interview can go belly up on the back of it. So if you really get caught in the moment, say, I'm really sorry, I haven't, I spent a lot of time preparing for this interview. That wasn't something that I had even actually considered, and I'm not really, nothing is coming to mind right now. So I, and they will come in. Then we've yet to meet an interview panel who doesn't want the candidate to do well.
So you're there to solve a problem for them.
Exactly. So they should be able to come in and go, okay, well, listen, let's move on, and they'll ask you the next question. Put a lid on it, move it to one side, try where possible to move on. You're getting marks for every question. So just because you haven't scored on this question doesn't mean you won't score in the rest.
I've got 3 or 4 ones which might. So pay, should you ever ask about pay? Or someone says, is pay important to ask? I would think probably not.
Probably not at interview stage, unless
not a graduate interview stage.
Unless they bring it up first. If they do bring it up, so it's okay to have done your research in advance, especially, there's so many different salary surveys out there now. So if you put an idea of what the post you're applying for, what the grad position you're applying for is, give them a range, kind of either side of the average. If they go, well, what are you hoping to earn in this post? And bear in mind that bigger companies probably have bigger budgets than smaller companies. So I know that the accountancy graduate programs are open right now, and you will know that the bigger companies, the big 4, the big 6, will probably pay more than the local accountancy firm where you might also get a training contract. So it's just to kind of know your audience as well. But if you know your averages and give a range, you should be safe enough without nailing your colour to the mast, but it shouldn't normally come up at first interview stage.
Especially, and I suppose there are times in your career when you can make a decision based purely on salary. It's not something we don't really advise for a graduate role. So, and as well, that you could probably research that online, so you would have a vague idea at the very least as to what you could expect to earn.
Absolutely. And as I say, always cover yourself by maybe giving a range.
And you know, should you send a thank you email post interview? Is that too familiar, or should you?
No, absolutely. If you have been shared the contact details of those that have interviewed you, absolutely. If not, you send, you can send a very brief thank you to the one person that has been your conduit or your link to date.
Okay.
Absolutely. No reason why you shouldn't.
And if you get asked this question, which is an interesting one, if someone asked you, how did you prepare for this interview with us here today?
This is one that's starting to creep in now. So a lot of what we talked about today will come in there. You will say, well, I took the job description, I highlighted the skills that you were looking for, I matched where I met those skills and met what it is that you were looking for. I also did a significant amount of company research. I know, and that's where your company research comes in. You're able to tell them about, the more than just the about us section of the website. And then you're going to package all that together and you're going to say, so then I, came up with the best examples I could to demonstrate how I best matched your skills. I learned more about the company and what it is involved. I was really excited when I heard about X and Y project. I'd love to know more about that. And that's why I decided to apply here for the post here today.
Okay, so, and this is the last one if your interview is going well and they ask you a question where you have so many examples of how you demonstrated this particular competency, that you can nearly trip over yourself trying to find the best one in your head. So again, that's more about your own research. If this is the example of how I showed leadership or how I showed, attention to detail, how do you deal with that? Say if you hadn't prepared that.
Again, buy yourself a little bit of time by saying, actually, I'm very lucky in that a number of the different roles I've held to date have meant that I have had exposure to significant either leadership experience or whatever skills it is they're looking for. So let me tell you about one time I think that best demonstrates that, so that you're kind of covering the bases that, showing that you've got more than just this one example. But they do like it best when you can focus on one example rather than talking specifics. It's a bit like as well, the leadership skills. It's much better if you can show how you demonstrated your leadership skills than giving a lovely theoretical answer about what leadership involves and what it, but not what you did in terms of being a leader.
Okay, great. Listen, thanks so much, Siobhan. We're just constantly over time.
I hope
absolutely great advice there, very practical, and those questions that some of the ones there, it's just great to get example answers to how you can deal with those sort of questions, those sort of situations. This will be up on this platform for the next 7 days, and this will be up on our YouTube channel afterwards. So please revisit this before your next interview. And Siobhan, thanks so much for your time.
On wearehilt.com.
Go on to wearehilt.com. Absolutely great organization will help me prepare for an interview. Okay, thanks so much.
Thanks a million. Take care. Enjoy the rest of the day. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Siobhan. Bye-bye.